Hey guys, it's M. And today, now that we've talked about that thing, we get to talk about who I really wanted to get into. Baran. One of the most interesting villains in HNK for me personally. Now, I'm aware of the reputation the post-Asura arcs have. Fillery extra content that had no real place in the story. This is a take I, for the most part, agree with, and if you look through my videos, I've probably said those exact words before. They could never carry any more weight than the last two major villains did without slowly shifting into something like Dragon Ball, raising the stakes with every subsequent villain. But in not doing that, a lot of these just felt like they didn't have much weight. But despite all of that, there's one arc out of these three that I quite like. One arc that stands out from the other two. The Baran arc, or as some websites like to call it, the Blanca arc. There's a lot to unpack here, so let me start with the surface level things. Three Princes was more of a feel-good arc. There wasn't necessarily a villain to dislike or focus on. It was mainly more of the dynamic between the royal family. The Borg arc has so much shit wrong with it we could be here all day. Rin's amnesia, Bat being a fucking moron, everyone around being incompetent, all of those things. Then we get to Borg himself, who I've heard people say is an interesting villain, which, how? As I said last video, he has no real deep reason for being there. He just happened to waltz into the story while everyone else was at a low point, and that's the only reason he mattered. His entire plot is Kent cut his eyes and he's angry about it. That's it. He's got the depth of a sheet of paper. The only thing he has going for him is his design, which again, like I said last time, would work as a background goon for pretty much any other villain in any other arc. He's the shit topping on top of an extremely shitty arc. You can argue he's the best thing about it, but what does that mean when it's the worst arc of the series? To give a rundown of Baran as a character, Baran had a sister and they seemed to live in a religious village. His sister fell ill with a deadly disease. Her and the townsfolk try and pray the sickness away, but Baran takes action, hurting someone to an extent we do not know, and stealing some pills so he could save her. When he tries to give them to her, she asks if he had to hurt someone for it. He shakes away the question and tries to make her take them anyway, but she responds, saying that God wouldn't forgive her if she took them, so she'll just continue her prayers. And a day or so after this, she dies, and they find out if she had taken those pills, she would have definitely survived. Baran then angrily lashes out, asking if this is how God rewards those who have faith. After he finishes explaining the story to Ken, it's obvious he feels God has let him down, and he's not going to wait for a savior who's never helped him or cared about him. Without continuing his motivation, this really hits for me personally. I was raised in a religious environment, and I've seen many people get hurt in that environment or experience something horrible, and the response they get is, "You'll be in our prayers," or something similar. At first glance, you can say something like, "It's stupid, why didn't she just take the pills?" But some people are just like that. Their belief's so strong that they would refuse what seems to be the simple remedy in this situation. This small bit felt real. Uncomfortably so the first time I read it. As the arc continues, you find out that he has some of Rao's techniques, and later he tells why. He ran into Rao in his youth as he dealt with the average everyday bandit with one of his techniques. At this moment, Baran saw Rao as something that surpassed God in his own words, and he approaches him asking to learn his fists. When Rao asks why, Baran says he wants revenge against God. He obviously meant this in a metaphorical sense, as in to not need him, and if he has the powers Rao did, he wouldn't be in a position to need God. Saying something like this to a character like Rao would obviously have a different impression on him and make him think Baran is someone just like him. But then, the young Baran ends up following Rao around, learning his techniques until one day, Rao leaves the young Baran. And while Rao is not around, Baran stumbles into a girl standing in the rain, with her dead parent not far from her. He covers her with his cloak and Rao sees this and tests Baran, picking up the girl, telling him to kill her or else he could never surpass God. When Baran fails to comply with this as he couldn't take an innocent girl's life, Rao fires a blast at him and leaves. This shows a big difference between Baran and Rao as characters. Rao is a man who wants to conquer all, to take everything with his own two fists. Baran seemingly wants something similar, the ability to not need anyone else, to have the strength in himself to the point that's no longer needed, where he wouldn't need to rely on God or anyone else to save him, as he doesn't believe in such a concept. But these two characters are different. Baran seeks strength, but not at the expense of those he cares about. Rao didn't care much for anyone who stood in his way, and he stayed this kind of character until his change of heart at the end of the series. The story then skips ahead to more recent times, with an exploring Baran before he conquered the city of Blanca and looking over it, saying it's a weak place that'll be crushed in time as it's known as the City of Lambs, and it's a place that firmly believes in God. As they speak, bandits arrive, and the leader of the town comes out in front of them, beginning to pray to God. It's not until her face is revealed and he sees she looks like his sister that he steps in, easily eviscerating the bandits. She claims it was an act of God that he intervened, and he, carrying the pain of his sister's death with him, can't accept this. Can't accept that people keep believing in a God that caused him nothing but pain and death. And this seems to be the event that caused him to go off of the deep end, and takes the leader of the city and all of its royals captive. He vows to prove that God is worthless and that he is superior, and that they should believe in him instead. This leads to the story as it properly starts, with Ken coming to the town and seeing people worship Baran as a deity, vowing to protect the city's leader loosely. Baran is a crazed perversion of what eats him. He doesn't want people to believe in a god that's caused him nothing but pain. In his own way, he probably sees himself as helping and protecting these people. Loosely would have died without him, and if the people devoted to him were praying to God instead of coming to him directly, they most likely would have died too. We don't get to see too much of this, but the baby at the start most likely would have died from the sickness it had if he didn't step in. He's righting wrongs in his own mind. He's protecting a woman who he sees as the reincarnation of his sister, along with a bunch of people who live just like her. He even says something that makes this point very evident in the arc, and the people's praise reinforce his thoughts on this stance. He's not a generic villain who's just terrorizing and enslaving people for shits and giggles. The people genuinely love him, and the only ones he'll deal with are those too devout to believe in him, or those who see him as a fake. This is why, other than the man who calls him out at the start of the story and the royal family, we don't see or hear of him attacking anybody at random. Other than the prince, which he attacks because of his ties to Loosely, he's not some warmongering maniac. He really does see himself as the hero of this story. You can really see how mad he's gone even from the beginning. He kills a man who doesn't believe in him as a god, despite the blatant hypocrisy that that's what he himself is trying to do all this for in the first place, to prove God or a godlike figure wrong. Even in his fight with Ken, when the group brings up that a man can't replace God, he brings up Rao, as I said earlier, a man he saw above it all. A man who didn't need some sort of savior. Baran's real breakdown doesn't begin until he finds out the man he knew relented for nothing and died resenting his own ways. Baran can't even believe it, and tries to pull the same move Rao did on him, telling the prince to fight Ken if he really wants to save Loosely. Then my least favorite part of the arc rolls in and talks him down. Admittedly, I don't like Ryu. He practically did nothing in this entire arc up until this point. While I understand why Rao's son talking Baran out of his insane state makes sense, I still hate Ryu. Anyways, as Baran goes to attack the child, he reminds himself of something his sister said to him, seemingly snapping him out of his maddened state, and from doing something it's proven he never would have done before. After all this, he hugs Ryu, and seeks atonement for what he's done. What I like is he doesn't completely 180 as a character. He seems saddened by all he's done in conquering the town and trying to rule over it as a deity, but he doesn't seem to act like if it's a woe's me scenario. He doesn't seem to have mystically shifted his stance on everything, but he just wants to own up for all the shitty things he did. And he does so in the most fitting way possible, getting one of his men to shoot him to death while making him say if he's truly a god, the arrow should bounce off of him. I really love this. While I'm upset Baran died because I think he and Ryu could have had an interesting character dynamic, with Baran teaching Ryu about his father or something similar, if he was to die, this was the perfect way to execute that and fit in the theme of his character. It was a great way to show everyone else that he was just a human like them. It's all this that makes me wonder how people say he's the worst villain of this series. He has way more character to dive into than either Borge or the Three Princes, and it's not even close. Honestly, I'd put him above Yuta and maybe Shin. He follows the person gone down the wrong path aspect the series is known for perfectly. Honestly, I could see him as one of the HNK 1 antagonists due to his quality. Now, does he suffer from some issues? Yeah. His backstory is a bit rushed. Sure, it says everything necessary, but it feels like it just barely managed to accomplish that. It would have been a bit nice to see a bit of young Baran being his own person away from Rao, or what happened while he was alone leaving the village he grew up in. His wording with Loosely is weird in the story. Could just be a translation thing, but while I believe he means accept his love in more of a platonic way, it could have been worded a bit stronger in that direction, because I could see some people getting a more southern interpretation of their dynamics. As for some more general arc things, I get the point of the executioners, but they felt kind of unneeded. The Blanca zombies were the only necessary goons, because in my opinion, they're more interesting than any other goons in this series, but are glossed over for the rest of the arc outside of their first appearance, despite the fact that they'd literally be able to kill pretty much every other army in the series. Ryu just happens to suck, as I've said before. Not really just a Blanca arc thing, but he felt really shoehorned in here, as he despawned for a majority of this arc. But regardless, the Baran arc I feel for everything I've described here is one of the best or better arcs in the show, and I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys think Baran is a good villain, or do you think he's under Borge? Somehow. As always, I'm glad to discuss with you guys in the comments, and I've been Ed, and I am out.